Hi! In this video, we're going to talk about peer feedback. Some people call it peer review or peer editing. I call it peer feedback because I want students to focus on giving feedback for this activity. I don't think the word review does this process justice. In order for a writer to better her essay, she needs to receive feedback from her peer, and her peer needs to do more than review her essay. Her peer needs to read through the writer's essay with a critical eye. Peer editing doesn't do this process justice either. Editing mostly consists of fixing surface level errors, but the feedback that the writer received needs to be more than feedback about surface level errors. What I'm trying to say is that when you are giving peer feedback, do not get into an automatic mode and just do what you have done in the past. Remember that there is a person behind the essay you are grading, and you cannot possibly know their whole story from reading their essay. So give them your time by reading their essay thoroughly and giving them helpful but honest feedback. I always tell students to be helpful but honest because you do not want to be mean to the writer, but you do not want to lie to them either. If you see that they don't have any support in their essay, don't tell them that their essay is perfect and doesn't need any changes. Tell them that they need support and give them some ideas of where to look for support from the text. You do not want to get into that automatic mode when you're giving peer feedback because you need to really read through and think about the writer's essay. If their essay is difficult for you to read, maybe this is because their essay is too wordy or they haven't proofread their essay. You should think about why their essay is difficult to read so you can let them know that, so they can then fix their essay. It can be difficult for writers to see when their own essay is confusing or doesn't make sense, so it helps to have that extra set of eyes to catch these kinds of things. When my students are doing peer feedback, I always encourage them to use me as a resource to help them provide good feedback. As a student, you're not an expert in essay writing or English grammar, so it's normal to need some support during peer feedback from your professor. For example, when you are reading a peer's essay, you may notice that something is wrong with their topic sentence, but you do not know what the problem is or how to explain it. This is the perfect time to ask your professor for some help. In this situation, I would look at the topic sentence and evaluate it to see what I think is wrong. Sometimes when I evaluate it, the person giving the feedback knows exactly what's wrong, but they felt unsure. In this case, I just confirm what they think. Other times, the person giving feedback is incorrect or doesn't know what's wrong, but they usually have pointed out a place where there is an issue. In this case, I provide them with what to say in their feedback, but they were still the one who found the issue. I also provide my students with a checklist to use during peer feedback. I'm a big fan of checklists, if you couldn't tell from my video about self-checking essays. There's something so rewarding about checking off something you've completed. Also, checklists are easy and fast to read, and I like them because they save time and decrease confusion about what is required for an assignment. The peer feedback checklist looks pretty similar to the checklist my students use for the self-check, but the last box on the peer feedback is for summative feedback and is called comments. But what does summative feedback mean, though? So if you use your word analysis and think about which words you've heard that sound similar to summative, you would probably come up with the words summary and summarize. Summative means the same thing, to discuss only the most important ideas of a text. Summative feedback is to give feedback that summarizes only the most important things for a student to change. It also helps writers process all of that feedback that's given and think about the most important things to change in their essay. There can be some downsides and issues about peer feedback though, and we'll talk about those in just a little bit. Let's get our feet wet and start giving some peer feedback first before we get into some of those issues that come up.
Okay, so this is an example essay and an example peer feedback. The things that we use for this in my class are going to be the peer feedback checklist. You're going to need to exchange essays with someone, so we're writing this as if we're giving feedback on this essay. And then you may want to include any other texts, any text that you used for doing the essay itself. And highlighter and pen or pencil. If you don't have a highlighter, it's okay. You can just do circling like you did for the self-check. Okay, so because in the self-check video, we went ahead and did the first couple of paragraphs, we're going to actually start in the second body paragraph. This is the second body paragraph, okay? So when you're in class, you need to exchange essays with a peer, so you should be giving feedback to them. When you're filling out the sheet here, writer's name means the person who wrote the essay, and then grader's name, you know, that's you. Although you're not really grading, that's just the best term I could come up with, okay? You can see that this checklist is pretty similar to the checklist for self-check, okay? So again, we're gonna start in this third body paragraph. While we're going and reading this, we can make changes on this. We can write things off in the margins or above the lines, but we should also be checking off things here. Okay. Longfellow brings readers into the playful atmosphere of the children's hour through the use of onomatopoeia, or words that sound like the sound they represent. Longfellow uses onomatopoeia because he wants readers to hear the same sounds the speaker hear and feel the same delight and warmth the speaker feel when he gets to spend time with his children. Okay, so here I can see there's some errors. I'm going to circle that. It needs to be because it's more formal. Here we have a subject-verb disagreement because this is third person singular. We also need third person singular here. Subject-verb disagreement there. And here. Personally, when I'm doing peer feedback, I like to get some of the surface level errors out of the way, and then I'll come back over to this and check off the things that are there. It might take me a couple of times to read through, but I'm going to really slow down and take my time and make sure I'm thinking about this peer's essay and I'm not just rushing through it. A lot of the onomatopoeia Longfellow uses early in the poem is representative of sounds the daughters make, such as patter of little feet, a whisper, a sudden rush, and devour. Readers can hear the patter, whisper, rush, and devouring in their heads because these words are designed to spark the imagination with their similarity to the sounds they represent. The children are not the only subject Longfellow uses onomatopoeia with. He also uses onomatopoeia with the speaker. Okay, so I've seen a few errors here. This is what we call a comma splice, C/S. Up here, a lot is informal, so we're going to say much of the onomatopoeia. Okay, let's keep reading. The speaker is describing how long he will hold his daughters in the round tower of his heart until the walls shall crumble to ruin and molder and dust away. The reader can hear the sound of walls falling with onomatopoeia of crumble and hear the walls disintegrate into nothing with the onomatopoeic word dust. What the speaker is saying in these lines is that he will hold his daughters in his heart figuratively until he dies by keeping his daughters just as they are in that moment in his memories. Okay, a couple of things here. I think this is getting wordy. I like the idea, but there's too many words to convey one idea, or maybe even a couple, but here there's just too many words, so we need to kind of cut down on the number of words that are there. Here we have the incorrect verb tense. When we're talking about a text, we tend to use present tense, what the speaker says, not what the speaker said or what the speaker is saying. Okay. Overall, it is vital that readers can hear these sounds of the poem because it brings to poem, all right, we've got an error here, the poem, to life and touches readers even more. Without onomatopoeia, readers would not feel the life of this poem and how alive the daughters and the speaker feel. Okay, good. So now that I've kind of read through it and caught some of the surface level errors, I am going to go back to the checklist and make sure that these sentences align up with the sentences that are in this paragraph. If there's anything missing, I'll highlight it. Okay, the topic sentence, it should be a literary technique and how it's connected to the main idea. So it says, Longfellow brings readers into the playful atmosphere of the children's hour through the use of onomatopoeia or words that sound like the sound they represent. Okay, I think that's good. It could potentially use a little bit more of the main idea. I can write that here. Anytime you're giving peer feedback, and if you want it to sound nice, you can always phrase it as a question. So you leave it up to the writer to decide if they want to change it, and you've given them that feedback still. Okay. So here, I'm going to put maybe more question mark. Next sentence, it says it should be an explanation, elaboration of the topic sentence, explain the technique and the general choices of this particular technique. Okay, so it says Longfellow uses onomatopoeia because he wants readers to hear the same sounds the speaker hears and feels the same delight, the warmth the speaker feels when he gets to spend time with his children. So yeah, I would say that that's explaining the technique. Okay, next sentence. Much of the onomatopoeia Longfellow uses early in the poem is representative of the sounds the daughters make, such as patter of little feet, a whisper, a sudden rush, and devour. Okay, we've got support here, which is what we needed. Give us a little bit of explanation too. Readers can hear the patter, whisper, rush, and devouring in their heads because these words are designed to spark the imagination with their similarity to the sounds they represent. Let's see, did we feel like that was explaining the support? Yes, I'd say it's explaining that onomatopoeia and why those words are onomatopoeia. The children are not the only subject Longfellow uses onomatopoeia with. He also uses onomatopoeia with the speaker. Okay, so I'd say this is leading us into the quotation, so it's not actually on here. The next thing that's on here is connect support one to argument. So we look back to see, hey, maybe does the sentence before connect the support to the argument at all? It does a little bit. So I'm going to write sort of. And that was, let's count which sentence that was. That was 1, 2, 3, 4. So the writer can kind of decide if they want to add more to this connect support, or do they want to just leave it the way it is, because it's kind of there. It could go and be more thorough and be longer and more developed, but it is present in some regard. Okay, the next thing we're looking for is support number 2. This sentence here is leading into the support, so it's not actually on the checklist, but it's good, it can stay in. The next sentence after that, the speaker is describing how long he will hold his daughters in the round tower of his heart until the wall shall crumble to ruin and molder and dust away. Yes, that's support. We've got that quotation there. After that, let's see if it explains that support. The reader can hear the sound of walls falling with onomatopoeia of crumble with the. Sometimes that happens the second time you read it. you realize you missed something or something was wrong the first time. With the onomatopoeia of crumble, and here the walls disintegrate into nothing with the onomatopoeic word dust. Okay, so yes, that's explanation. Next, we're looking for connect support number 2 to the argument. What the speaker says in these lines is that he will hold his daughters in his heart figuratively until he dies by keeping his daughters just as they are in that moment in his memories. To me, that kind of reads more like explanation. It's just explaining this a little bit further. I'm not sure that it is connecting it to the main idea. I think that the writer needs to work on this one. Here would be a good place to add it. Okay, then we're looking for wrap paragraph up. Let's see if this sentence and this sentence are wrapping up. Overall, it is vital that readers can hear these sounds of the poem because it brings the poem to life and touches readers even more. That's kind of more explanation. It kind of relates to the main idea, but I think just more explanation of it. So let's see the next sentence. Without the onomatopoeia, readers would not feel the life of this poem and how alive the daughters and the speaker feel. I'd say yes, that's a wrap up. Okay, so overall, it looks like just some connections a little bit, some surface level stuff, but really that's not too bad. That surface level stuff is usually pretty easy to fix. It's this stuff here that can be more difficult to fix. That takes more time. Okay, so we're just going to leave off with that paragraph today for the peer feedback. If we need more practice, then we'll go ahead and do this paragraph together in another video. So you've got the checks here, marks in here, highlights of anything or circles that is missing. After you finish the entire peer feedback, then you're going to check for these things, and you're also going to add a summative feedback. That goes in this section. Remember that the summative feedback sums up what the overall feedback of the essay is. Okay, what are the main points? But let's check these things here. Let's see if there's a heading. That should be on the first page, and it's going to be an MLA heading. Because this is English 101, we use MLA typically. Okay, so here's the heading here. It should be student's name, professor's name. Typically we want to include the professor or doctor if they have a doctorate, and then last name as well. But we also include first name, even though we don't typically refer to our professors by first name, just in case someone has the same last name. Then the class with the section number, because a lot of professors will teach multiple sections of the same class. This semester, I've got several sections of English 101. And then down here is going to be the date, and we put it in what I call the European format. So it's day, month, year. Okay, so that's correct. Font. In MLA, it says that you need to use a legible font and you need to use 12-point font. Most professors have a specific font they want to use, and most of them are going to use Times New Roman. My classes, I say Times New Roman because it's the academic standard. So I look here, and yes, this is Times New Roman. It's 12-point font. It's not too big or too small. Page numbers. So we check the first page first, obviously. We're going to want to have last name, one space, and then the page number. So that's correct. Let's just double check the other pages because sometimes the first page is correct, but the other pages are not. So let's go back to this page here, and we can see that this isn't correct. So there's some sort of page issue going on. So we'll mark that here. Some are incorrect. Okay, so Jeannie knows to go back and fix those page numbers. Double spaced. We can do a quick look over here. And we should have an idea of whether it's double spaced or not from giving that peer feedback. So this is double spaced. MLA works cited page. So they need to have that works cited page, but it also needs to be in proper MLA format. Okay, so here's the works cited page. The first thing, you want to have the title work or works cited. Work is only when it's singular. Works is for plural. This here is going to be centered. It doesn't need any underlines. And then we're going to have our entry. Typically, it's going to follow this general format, but it varies based on the source. So it's going to be authors' names, title of the actual piece. The container is what this one is. Publisher, year, and then this is if it has like a URL or a DOI, if it is a scholarly article or a database source. Okay, that'll go there. So this is a correct works cited page. Over here, I'll check this off. In-text citations, a lot of times those are going to be with parentheses. Now for this particular text, it's a poem. It doesn't have page numbers and it doesn't have line numbers. So as long as we're using Longfellow in the text with citations, it's correct. Now there were some times when Longfellow wasn't used, so I'm going to say double check. Sometimes you cited the author. But not always. Okay, so here is my summative feedback. You'll notice that I didn't take up the full thing, but I did write a significant amount. So it says, your essay is good, and I can tell you put in a lot of work. Good job on your quotations especially. So, gave them some positive feedback and some specific positive feedback here. One thing you can work on is explaining how the quotations and literary techniques relate to the main idea of the text. So just giving an overall one. Also, you had some surface level errors that I marked, but they're easy to fix. So I just said, in general, this is what you needed to work on with these. Okay, so that's the example peer feedback.
One problem that can happen with peer feedback is if you get an essay that's either very short or clearly very incomplete. There are many different reasons why a writer may have not gotten around to writing more, but try to think the best, or maybe don't even worry about the reasons for not finishing that essay. Don't assume that they're lazy, stupid, or a bad writer. Everybody has stuff going on in their lives, and you never know what someone is going through, so be compassionate and be kind. That doesn't mean you have to be dishonest with the writer, though. Tell them what their essay is missing and give them some suggestions of where to go with their essay. Look at what they have written and give them some ideas of how to develop what they do have. The writer is already behind on their writing, and the least you can do is give them a little bit of direction to help them catch up. Another issue that can happen with peer feedback is when you receive your peer feedback and you have little to no feedback. Unfortunately, this is kind of the luck of the draw, and sometimes people do not put effort into looking at another person's essay. Do not assume that just because you did not receive any feedback, though, that your essay is perfect. Everybody has room to grow. Some of the best student essays I've ever read still had errors, needed a tad more explanation, or had to rework some things. If you receive poor feedback, try to let your professor know after class so your professor can talk with the person about it. Then you will want to find someone whom you trust to give you thorough feedback. Think of family members, friends, peers, current and past teachers, and tutors who you can go to receive feedback on your essay. I know this is frustrating to have to go to someone else, but it's worth it to spend those extra 15-20 minutes getting additional feedback so you can improve your essay. The next time you do peer feedback in class 2, you may think about asking the professor to let another student give you feedback, not the same one. When you ask this, make sure to do it one-on-one. There's nothing wrong with speaking up about your right to have someone else give you feedback, but make sure that you're polite about it. Do it one-on-one. One final issue with peer feedback that comes up is that you receive enough feedback, but you suspect some or all of the feedback is inaccurate. This usually happens with grammar errors, comma errors, and other surface level errors. If this problem does occur, try to speak with your professor after class about the suspected inaccurate feedback. This happens to students pretty regularly, and I'm always happy to look at the feedback and fix it or explain why it's correct or incorrect. You can always ask your peer about the feedback they gave you, but it can be much easier to just ask your professor. If you do choose to talk to your peer, make sure you are respectful and word it as a question, such as, "I'm not sure why a comma needs to go here. Would you mind explaining it to me? I always forget my comma rules." You never want to be rude or accusatory because your peer was only trying to help. So, a lot of times putting those questions, you can ask your peers that. You can also use those questions whenever you're writing peer feedback too. Questions are a great way of writing things down without being mean and without being offensive. So there are some downsides to doing peer feedback, but there are also some positives to doing peer feedback. It can be a really great and helpful activity. You get to look at your peers' essays and see kind of what they were thinking and where they were going and make sure that you're on the right track. It also gives peers a chance to kind of get explanation or get feedback from someone who's not the professor. A lot of times students are better at explaining things to each other than the professor is. The professor, has been doing this for a long time maybe, or they have a lot of experience in this area, so they may not know how to explain it in a way that is, the way that you talk. Maybe, they explain it differently. So it can be good to have the peer there to explain it and to talk it through. All right, so that's all we have time for today. I want to thank you for watching this video, and I hope seeing an example of peer feedback and talking about peer feedback helps you understand the importance of giving good peer feedback and how to go about giving peer feedback. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.